Hello, I'm Mago Gately, crime correspondent with The Star. Welcome to another episode of The Star's special podcast series focusing on the trial of Gerry the Monk Hutch. As you will all be aware by now, Mr. Hutch is on trial at the non-jury special criminal court in Dublin. There he is charged with the murder of David Byrne at the Regency Hotel in north central Dublin on the 5th of February 2016. That's a charge he denies. Two men are also on trial alongside Mr. Hutch. Jason Bonney and Paul Murphy are not charged with the murder of David Byrne. Instead, they are accused of helping a crime gang carry out the murder by providing it with cars. Like Mr. Hutch, they deny the charge and all three are now on trial. And I'm now joined by the Star's chief reporter Paul Healy, who was in court today for one of the most dramatic days so far of the trial. And I have to say I'm slightly jealous, but Paul did a great job. Hello, Paul.
How's it going, Mick?
It was a great day, was it?
As you said, one of the most traumatic, definitely the most traumatic day of the trial. We've been talking about Jonathan Dowdall for, 2 months now? So we finally heard his evidence today. He was brought before the Special Criminal Court. I don't really know where to begin, to be honest with you, but maybe we could talk about just, the atmosphere a little bit, because it was quite surreal.
Well, one thing that interested me, look, I was in, you were away, and by the way, props to Ciaran Bradley for filling in for both of us. He did a great job, but the old gang is back now. So you were away and I was away, but when I was there, the trial was in Court 11, which is what you and I would call the Special Criminal Court. But I understand today it was moved to Court 17. I think that's is it on the next floor up?
Yeah, it's the next floor up, the fourth floor of the CCJ.
And do I have any idea why it was moved?
Yeah, so the reason why it was moved, I think it's just purely logistical, and also a security matter, I suppose, for the Gardaí. Basically, the layout of Court 11, it's quite a big court. That's why I suppose they sat the Special Criminal Court case there up until now. But they don't have a jury entrance, as far as I'm aware, in Court 11. So they moved it up to Court 17 because there is an area that's usually in a typical criminal trial preserved for a jury, and it has its own separate entrance. And Jonathan Dowdall was brought up through that entrance, which is on the opposite side of the courtroom to where the accused man, Gerry Hutch, was sitting. So the two of them basically don't come into any kind of close physical contact at all. I presume that's, just also from a logistical point of view, Dowdall doesn't have any contact with anybody in the room in terms of, he doesn't have to walk around the crowd at all. He just comes out his own separate entrance. So that's why that was done. But it is just something that I noticed immediately when I finally got into the room. It's a smaller room, without a doubt. And we took up 2 rows of seats. There were 2 more rows of seats behind us. And there was an awful lot of Gardaí in the court, apart from ourselves, the media. So there wasn't really a whole heap of space for the massive crowd that was there. And I mean, there was a huge crowd there. The level of interest in this is just unprecedented, really. And there was, when I got there, so that the case starts at 11, I got there at 10 o'clock. And there was already just a huge queue of people just sort of all lined up trying to get in.
So when I've been there, and I know you and I have both been getting messages from an awful lot of punters, which we welcome, asking, is there public access and that sort of stuff. And, that's no problem. But when I was there, when you were away, there were probably maybe 10, maybe 12 members of the public who were there. How many members of the public were there today, Paul?
Oh gosh, I didn't count. But when I was there, maybe 40, 50, but I'm sure there was in excess of that, because eventually they opened up a second courtroom to watch the proceedings on a video. And that initially wasn't the plan. In fact, we'd actually been informed in the morning that there would not be an overflow court, which to me was extraordinary, because there has been an overflow court on other days. But if any day required an overflow court, it was today. But they did actually open one up eventually, so I have no idea how many people were in that room, but I can tell you they packed as many as they could eventually into the room we were in.
And was it difficult for you to get in? I understand that there was the media were effectively called in, so you had to queue up to get in.
Yeah, well, like previously, I've just walked in, I've said my name. They've kind of kept a list of the journalists that are going into court every day. So they've some of the guards that are there have kind of gotten to know our faces and kind of just wave us in. But on this occasion, it was far different. Plenty of Gardaí around, and the guard that was actually overseeing letting the journalists in was I don't want to say he was being strict. He was doing his job, but he was just he was being very cautious and careful. He decided to read through a list that he had. I don't know who provided him with this list, but he read through a list of names, and your name was mentioned before mine.
Obviously before yours, which is the really important thing. That's the most important aspect.
I was going to loudly exclaim, "He's not here!" But anyway. I didn't.
But can I just ask, Paul? So when the days I've been there, we walk in through the main entrance of the CCJ, and there's a Garda armed support unit jeep is parked up there.
Yes.
And then when you go inside, there's members of the
public order.
I would call the Rats Guard, but they call the public order unit.
Yeah.
Was there more security than usual today?
Yes, there was a lot of, shall we say, plainclothes members of An Garda Síochána, and you could see that they were wearing earpieces. That's the first time I've ever seen that. I couldn't even tell you what unit they are, what rank they were, but there was plenty of them around, looking like Secret Service, really, and just hanging about the building and in the courtroom. That's extraordinary. We haven't seen that to date. Just in terms of getting in, they read through all the names and we eventually got in. So there were 14 of us on that list, but I think eventually they squeezed more, like 20-something journalists into the room, piled into the room and sitting there getting ready for... We didn't know what we were getting ready for. And then we started to hear some stuff that nearly indicated we weren't going to hear from Jonathan Dowdall at all, which...
Just before we go there, can we just maybe, because we haven't done this before, and I was conscious of this when I was in Court 11, which is the same thing, can we just talk about the geography of the court, who sits where, and that sort of thing? Yeah,
so the makeup of the court is that the journalists are sitting in the front row in the centre of the room. As I said, this is a smaller courtroom, so we actually took up 2 rows. And in the front row, there is like a little kind of a desk for us to put our laptops or our notebooks onto. But I was sitting in the second row, so I had my laptop on my lap. Behind that, then there were 2, if not maybe 3, benches for a public gallery. And then to our left, is the section where Gerry Hutch and Paul Murphy and Jason Bonney sit. So it's a dock that just sits separately on the left-hand side. Straight in front of us then is where the barristers, to our left is Brendan Gretton, the senior counsel for Hutch, and the other defence for Paul Murphy and Jason Bonney. And to the right then is Prosecuting Counsel Sean Gillane, and his team, and then directly in front of them are the 3 judges, Justice Tara Burns and the two judges who are with her.
And one other aspect, there's obviously, and people probably aren't aware of this, there is also a pew which is reserved for the family of David Byrne, and that's sometimes, I'm guilty of this, they're a family. And my views on this, that there's nobody deserves to be murdered. We don't have extrajudicial killing in this state. So David Byrne, whatever was said about him, whatever he did, the man was a victim, and they have a special pew reserved for them as the victim's family.
Yes, they were seated at the back row. It's worth noting as well, the family of David Byrne have been in for pretty much every day of the trial, or at least a member of the family, but this is the first day in a while that both of Mr. Byrne's parents, James Byrne and Sadie Byrne, one of their daughters, Melanie, I believe, and also the partner of David Byrne, Kelly Quinn, they were all in attendance at court. So it's obviously a huge day for them as well. They were obviously apprehensive and waiting for this day as well.
And we have to do our jobs, we're journalists, but we do sometimes lose sight of that. They're a family and they've lost a loved one, and they're sitting through what can be very tough evidence. But on to today. So Jonathan Dowdall, the man who is being assessed for the witness security programme, the man who is giving evidence on behalf of the state. So I take it there was a sense of anticipation in the courtroom before he came in. Just talk us through what happened before he came in.
Yeah, well, as I said, we began to hear some information that made us think we're not going to hear from him again, because the court opened. Gerry Hutch had sat down at the last minute. No sign of Dowdall yet. And the 3 judges came out, and the prosecuting counsel Sean Gillane indicated that there was an issue. It was further discussed then by Brendan Gretton, senior counsel. He had been made aware of this as well, that apparently Jonathan Dowdall, he'd been brought from Limerick prison up to the court's building, but they had received, the prosecution had received correspondence from a solicitor acting for Mr. Dowdall, basically saying, outlining that he had a number of preconditions and issues that he wanted to raise before he gave evidence. This came as complete, out of the blue for both sides. But Sean Gillane basically was essentially saying, this isn't really my problem. I got this and I'm raising the court's awareness about it, but what am I supposed to do about it, basically? We are where we are. He was supposed to give evidence today, but he has a couple of things that apparently he wants to address. So Brendan Grehan actually said that he was setting forth preconditions, which he says was extraordinary in and of itself, and apparently he had a whole list of complaints that he wanted to address before he gave evidence. But Miss Justice Tara Burns wasn't really having it. She was basically saying, is he in the building? Yes, he's in the building. Well, then we're going to hear from him today and we're going to go ahead with matters. It's not a matter for the prosecution and it's not really a matter for the court either, she said. So lo and behold, then we were going to have the evidence of Jonathan Dowdall, but first he had to be brought before us. And a member of An Garda Síochána then was going to give evidence in relation to the witness protection program, which he's still applying for. And
we're not allowed. My understanding is that senior officer did give evidence, but we're not allowed. There's an order that we can't identify him or we can't name him or her. I don't know. I wasn't there, so.
Yes, it's a detective superintendent who can give the rank, but. I'm not going to identify the Garda because we've been asked not to, but after all the hullabaloo of getting the public into the court, the public were then told to get back out again because this Garda can't be identified. So that's what happened, and there was a very sort of brief back and forth between the Garda and Brendan Grehan in relation to the witness protection program and how it operates. And basically, he was asking, is there a like-for-like situation where a person who's put through the witness protection program, are they given the same level of wealth that they had before they went into the program? Is there a like-for-like, so they get the same amount of the same, say, property worth the same value or something like that? And essentially, she said, in general, yes, that's the case. So, you might be able to speak a bit more about that.
No, because I remember I did a story just at the start of this about the witness security program, and I thought it was really interesting because, we all thought that they were, it would cost the state, whoever, not just any witness, not just Jonathan Dowdall, if he is entered into it, it was all going to be like £1 million and he'd be resettled on all this sort of stuff. And I was lucky enough to know somebody who was central in a previous life, I suppose. He was central to the witness security program, and we did a story about this. He told me that he would have expected such a case to cost the state about €100,000. And one thing that he did say is, look, it is very much like for like. So if you've got a €400,000 house in Dublin, you get a 400,000. But even then, what they do is the guards would, or the program would rent a property for you for a couple of months. So it's after a couple of months in this new country, wherever it is, we're not allowed to say where, you're effectively on your own. But the other interesting aspect about it was, because I know there's been lots of stuff about this about America, and what was told to me was that no foreign citizen has ever come into any witness security program in America. So it's not as if from Ireland, Britain or anywhere, the Americans don't accept you. So it'll be somewhere else, but who knows? But I just thought it was really interesting was, it doesn't cost that much, and, it's like for like, and you get a few months rent, but then after that, you're on your own, and the protection for that person is not a matter for the guards because they don't have jurisdiction abroad. It's a matter for the local police force.
It's very interesting. As I say, this was very brief evidence. I think the purpose of it really was just for the Garda to state on the records that no matter what Jonathan Dowdall said today, in the case at all, it's not going to have any bearing on his application, which as of yet, he's not been admitted to the witness protection program. And the Garda did say that will have no bearing. No matter what he says today, it would have no effect on any application that he had for the witness protection program. I'll just circle back a little because Jonathan Dowdall was obviously brought out at this point, which in and of itself was very dramatic. Everybody was just looking over to the right, watching this fella coming out into the jury section and sitting in the foreman's chair. He was suited and booted, so he was wearing a navy blazer and a blue shirt. And I hope it's okay for me to say this, but I think it's reasonable that anyone in his position would be quite stressed and quite nervous, and he certainly looked it. He did not look at Gerry Hutch. I looked at him quite a bit. He didn't look at Gerry Hutch once, as far as I could tell. He kept his eyes in the direction of the judges the entire time, even when he was under cross-examination. He really didn't look at Sean Gillane at all, bar the odd question, but he mostly kept his eyes darted directly towards the judges. But Gerry Hutch was staring right at him, and that was noticeable, because that's the first thing you want to do when you see him coming out. I wanted to look where he was looking and where Hutch was looking. I think everybody was doing the same thing.
And how did Gerry Hutch look? Did he look, what was his demeanour during this?
I mean, I can't read his mind, but I did notice that he was staring right at him. So, I mean, you wouldn't want to be a body language expert. I'm not, but as I said, Jonathan Dowdall seemed to very deliberately not look in the direction of Gerry Hutch at all, whereas Gerry Hutch kept his eyes fixed on Jonathan Dowdall. And
I understand that Jonathan Dowdall, as you say, he was in the jury box, but he wasn't alone. There were people with him.
Yeah, he had, I think, I'm going to say 5 prison officers flanking him.
Wow.
Gardaí as well. So, he was well guarded, so to speak.
Were they armed Gardaí? Do you know? I think somebody said that he saw 2 armed Gardaí.
I couldn't say.
Okay. So there were detectives, probably.
Yes,
was it?
Yeah, plainclothes.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a large Garda presence in the courtroom, and as I said, there were members of Garda Síochána who were plainclothes, who had earpieces. So, I mean, quite a high level of security in the room.
But just before we get on to the evidence itself, was there an air of expectation in the newsroom, in the courtroom? Was it tense?
It was quite tense, because nobody really kind of knew what's going to happen next. I mean, we'd already heard about this issue that he had a list of complaints, so I thought, right, is that going to be addressed now? Is he now going to read out this list of complaints? Are we going to have to come back at another time because he's not going to give evidence? But it just wasn't mentioned again. Like, we just got straight into it. So I don't know whether it was communicated to him in any way that we're not going to deal with your complaint or whatever. But I mean, the judge, as I said, dismissed it earlier. And that was it. We were going to get straight into the evidence. Prosecuting Counsel Sean Gillane stood up and he started to question Jonathan Dowdall. And it started off, quite normally and innocently, just asking him to confirm very basic details about who he is, where he's from, coming from a family of mother, father, brother, sister, being raised in Ballybock in the inner city, and just details about how he grew up, and then eventually details about, how did you come to know the Hutch family? And he said that he knew the Hutch family through his mother, that his mother knew Gerry Hutch through Gerry's wife, and that they had known each other through the market stall business, and that some of the Hutch children came over to their house, and he got to know the likes of Gary Hutch, Patrick Hutch Jr., and Derek Delboy Hutch, so kind of grew up around these people and got to know them. And I think 2 of them worked on the stall in town, on the mother's stall. So that's how he got to essentially know the Hutch family. He said, I mean, even it was just fascinating just to watch him. I mean, we even how many times you watch a witness get up on the stand and swear on the Bible? I mean, he seems so nervous, but he's there with his hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. I mean, even that was just fascinating to watch.
I'm sorry, just I've done this, and it is extremely nerve-wracking standing up and taking the oath, and it's terrible. But did he get more or less nervous as he went on? It's
difficult to tell. As I said, he seemed tense the whole way through. That's the best way I could describe it. He just seemed very tense and not making eye contact with anybody other than just facing the direction of kind of just. I think he was thinking quite hard on what he was saying. He was answering the questions, no problem. He was offered a jug of water, so a jug of water was brought to him. I did notice that throughout he was speaking. He did occasionally stop to take drinks of water, not in any particular interesting place. I suppose any of us talking for that length of time, even myself now, I'm looking, I should have brought a glass of water. So particularly when you're nervous, you're probably trying to take breaks in between. But as I said, we just got into his background, and how he got into the electrical business, starting Dowdall Electrical, and he gave Patrick Hutch Jr. an apprenticeship, and Patrick Hutch worked with him for a period of time. Just to remind people, Patrick Hutch Jr. is the son of Patsy Hutch. Patsy Hutch's other son, Gary Hutch, was murdered in the murder that started the whole feud, basically. We've heard a lot about Patsy Hutch throughout this trial, and again today. And
Patrick was also charged with the murder of David Byrne, but through various issues, including the death of Colin Fox, there was a nolle prosequi entered. So, I mean, that's it. The state has effectively dropped the charges or shelved the charges against Patrick Hutch. So he's an innocent man.
He is an innocent man. We heard a lot about him today, and what Jonathan Dowdall thought about his alleged involvement in the Regency Hotel, but I'll come to that. As I said, he talked about his relationships with the Hutches, and then it just escalated from there. I mean, if you stopped to breathe for a second, you've missed something crazy, and it really did. I was trying to live tweet, which I don't know why I agreed to that, but there you go. I was trying to live tweet and also type down what's happening, and it's it was just a mile a minute. We started. That was
the same when we were doing the bugged conversation between Jonathan Dowdall and Gerry Hutch, and there is no argument that it is them, that the court has heard that. But it was I like an idiot decided I'm going to tweet this, right? And after about a minute, I went, here, good luck. It was almost impossible. So I feel for you, brother. It's extremely hard, and people don't really I know this is terrible about journalists giving out, but it was a hard graft. So I've been there, done that. So fair play. Anyway, go on.
Well, I tried to tweet the highlights, so to speak, and even now I'm probably going to miss out on a lot of what he said. I'm going to give you the meat and potatoes of it, but I'm sure there's lots more that I'm not going to remember. I'm giving to you pretty raw. I'm only just out of the court, really. But the first kind of bombshell that we got into was in relation to the murder of Gary Hutch. So September 2015, he was asked about his knowledge of the murder of Gary Hutch, and he opened it talking about his knowledge as to why it happened. He said, I was told that the Kinahans believed Gary was an informant, and that certain things, he said, were going on in Spain, and the Kinahans were blaming Gary. He said, that's what I believed at the time. And then he kind of went back just to say, well, I didn't know Gary Hutch anymore at that point. I hadn't seen him since he was 10 years old. And
just a bit of context to this. Daniel Kinahan's mother died, I think it was late 2014, and there was a big funeral in Dublin. And if you remember, there was a piece of graffiti on a church, I think it was a Russian Orthodox church in Dublin, and it said, Gary Hutch is a rat. Now, we, as ever, journalists are very lucky if we know 10% of what's going on, and we just did not realise the import of that. But it does show that there were tensions. And I mean, even going back to the whole feud, one of the things that I was told, and one of the things we were always briefed about, was that the Kinahans did believe. It's not for us to say if he is or isn't. We can only tell you what the Kinahans believed, and we've believed this for a long. We were told this for a long time, that the feud started because the Kinahans believed that Gary Hutch was an informant. So that has been out there, and we've all been aware of that. So it's just interesting for him to say that, I have to say.
Yeah, but he goes on like this for a while. He keeps saying, I was told this, I was told this, I was told this, and I'll come back to all the things he was told, but eventually Sean Gillane said, and you were told all this by Patsy Hutch, and he said, yeah. So he was allegedly told all this by Patsy Hutch, who he said he knew from the age of 17, 18. He said he knew Patsy Hutch really well, and that they had a bit of kind of a friendship, a relationship there. So that explains that alleged relationship. But he talks about the murder of Gary Hutch and why he says he was told it happened. He said that he was told that Patrick Hutch Jr. was accused of trying to kill Daniel Kinahan in Spain. And I was told he didn't do it, he said. So Patsy told him that his son didn't do it, he wasn't involved.
And I'm going to give context for that. That is the August 2013 attempt on the life of Daniel Kinahan in his villa in Estepona, and whoever the gunman was, We have no idea. But the gunman thought Daniel Kinahan was coming out of the house, when in fact it was an innocent boxer called Jamie Moore who suffered very serious injuries to his leg, and he was lucky to survive. But that, my understanding is that would be about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dowdall did actually say that he only learned afterwards that it was in relation to the shooting of a boxer, he said. So, but at the time he understood it this particular way, he said. But he said as a result of this, he was told that the Kinahans were looking for a sum of money, €200,000, to settle this dispute. And he said that the Kinahans also wanted to show an example of Patrick Hutch Jr., so they wanted to shoot him in a punishment shooting, he called it, in the Drumcondra area. And he said his understanding was that happened, and that a family member personally drove Patrick Hutch to a location in Drumcondra where he was shot. And he said that he was told that the person who shot Patrick Hutch was Daniel Kinahan.
Now, this is really interesting. Paul, we journalists, this feud has been really interesting for the sort of propaganda war. And we have been told an awful lot of things from all sides, and that's great. And we try and filter it out and get to the truth. But I remember probably 2017 being told that Patrick Hutch was shot in the leg in Drumcondra, down an alleyway in Drumcondra by Daniel Kinahan, that he flew in especially to carry it out. And I was completely sceptical of it, right? And then I remember sitting in Patrick Hutch's trial when there was reference to someone being shot in the leg in Dublin, and I went, oh ho, but that is really sensational. So 5 years ago we were told about Daniel Kinahan allegedly shooting Patrick Hutch. Now, I don't know if it's ever been said publicly about Daniel Kinahan, because there was plenty of media coverage about a shooting of someone on the Hutch side, but it was never Daniel Kinahan. We were told it, but just legally you can't. But I just thought that was really interesting that was said today in court.
Yeah, that's certainly the first time that has been heard in a public forum.
You and I were aware of it, but it's different to hear something in court.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just stunning. Like this case is just to hear. I mean, as I said, we did know that, but to hear those words out of Dowdall's mouth was just like. And I think we found ourselves sort of going wow to each other every 5 seconds, like, because it's just crazy. But anyway, I'll move on to, just because we haven't even got halfway through the evidence. Basically, supposedly this punishment shooting was supposed to happen. The 200,000 was supposed to be paid, he said, but that didn't settle things. Apparently, he said around Christmas 2015 there was an attempt on Patsy outside of school, he said. I'm not familiar with that now. I don't know if you remember an attempt on Patsy outside of school.
No, that was really interesting, because we broke the attempt on Gerry Hutch in December in Lanzarote in December 2015. It was New Year's Eve, New Year's Day 2015, 2016, and that was a big story when we broke it, and it was really massive actually. But I had never heard about Now, we know that Patsy survived numerous hits afterwards, and we know that we've all written about this and have spoken about this. Several men were caught a couple of hundred yards away from Patsy's house, and the Doc B and the ERU foiled several hits. But I never heard about an attempt on Patsy's life, before the Regency, shall we say.
Yeah, and Dowdall said at that stage it was getting out of hand, and that Patsy the Hutches had essentially come to him asking him was there anything he could do in terms of trying to quell the feud, stop the violence from happening. So this would have been the end of 2015 into the start of 2016, so about January 2016. Dowdall says he was approached by the Hutches to try and broker some sort of a peace with people he knew from Republican backgrounds. And Dowdall seemed quite at pains to stress at this point. He said, I want to clear something up. I do wonder whether this is what his complaint was, or his issue was that was addressed earlier, because he said he wanted to address that, it had been said that he had gone to speak with people in the provisional IRA, provisional members, and that's been stated already. And he wanted to say, no, I didn't meet with anyone provisional. He said it was dissident people. It wasn't in any way provisional. So he was at pains to state that that he didn't meet with anyone in the provisional IRA.
That's significant.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, people wanted to jump on that and make an issue out of that, political issue. I know that's something maybe for another day. But
I think I might have a possible. Sorry, Paul. I think I might have a possible explanation for this, just from my experience of covering the special. So obviously, people are brought before the special and they're accused of being dissident Republicans and everything, but they're not. They're accused of being members of the IRA, right? But that can mean anything from the continuity IRA, the new IRA, the real IRA. You know what I mean? To the Garda Síochána, it's all just the IRA, right? So I wonder, has that got something to do with it? It's just, there's loads of different dissident groupings and everything, but you're not. The charge is membership of Óglaigh na hÉireann, membership of an illegal. It's always membership of an illegal organisation styling itself Óglaigh na hÉireann or the IRA, right? And I think that might be one possible explanation for this. That in the law, it's just the IRA.
Yeah, I mean, Dowdall did a lot to downplay sort of who he was meeting and what he could do at that point in time. I mean, he said that he was approached, but he wasn't gone on the idea, I think he said, and that he didn't really know. He kind of basically didn't really know anybody, but he would try to talk to people that he kind of knew or that he might have known about. But he seemed to be quite honest in saying, I didn't really know anybody. So he said there were innocent lives at stake, so he'd do what he could to try and stop the feud. And he said at that point that he felt it probably could have been stopped, that it was at that point something that could have been resolved. So we're talking January, early, just before the Regency Hotel attack. Dowdall thought that he might be able to help resolve the feud.
So I'm just going to interact for a wee second, if I can, Paul, just about when they talk about it getting out of hand. Just off the top of my head, these are the things that had happened up until January 2016. Obviously, there was the murder of Gerry Hutch. Then we know there was an attempt on the life of Daniel Kinahan at another boxing event in West Dublin, when his bodyguards saw a car acting suspiciously and they threw a rubbish bin at it and got Daniel out of the way. And that was in November 2015. Almost immediately, I think within a couple of days, a man called Daithí Douglas was shot as he walked his dog in Cabra. Now, he survived that shooting, but we know in July of 2016 he was shot dead in his wife's shop in South Inner City, Dublin. And then in December 2015, they tried to murder the monk. But also in December 2015, they shot a man called Darren Cairns, shot him dead in a pub in North Dublin. Excuse me. He and Daithí Douglas were both friends, and they were both shot effectively because the Kinahan cartel blamed them wrongly for the November attempt on the life of Daniel Kinahan. So, whoever was saying that about it getting out of hand, they were right, because there had been a lot of incidents there that really in quite a short period of time, and it was quite concentrated.
Yeah, I mean, it escalated further, obviously, from the Regency, but it's important to contextualise that, because that really shows how much had already happened at that point. Was it really resolvable? Who knows? But moving on from that, we got into the evidence about the alleged meeting that Dowdall had, handing over the hotel keys, which his father then would use to book the hotel room in the Regency on the night of the 4th, so just before the Regency incident. And Jonathan says that he was contacted by, so he was on his way back from the north from his so-called peacekeeping mission with his father, when he was contacted by Patsy Hutch saying, "Did you book the room yet?" He's saying basically, "Did you book the room yet?" And he was saying, "No, I didn't book the room." So they went back home. His father picked up his passport, and then he drove his father to the Regency Hotel. And we know all of this evidence in relation to the booking of the room. That is what got Patrick and Jonathan Dowdall convicted of facilitating the murder of David Byrne. But he says he sat out in the car while his father did that. But I want to get to the meeting, and probably the most crucial piece of evidence of all, which is this meeting with Gerry Hutch in the days following the Regency attack. We've heard about this before, but to actually hear Dowdall talking about this moment, or this alleged moment, was just fascinating. So he says that he met with Gerry Hutch on the Monday following the Regency incident, and then he went into a park in the Whitehall area opposite a church, parked his Land Cruiser up, went in through a little gate, and he says Gerard Hutch, he kept calling him Gerard Hutch, we keep calling him Gerry, but he seems to be kind of known as Gerard by people. Yeah.
In the inner city, he's known as Gerard. It's us who call him Gerry. Yeah. But the local community calls him, and they always have called him Gerard.
Well, he was asked then, was he alone? He said, yeah, he was standing there alone, waiting for him. Yeah, so he said that Gerry Hutch was quite agitated, and he was asking him about, did you see the papers? specifically the Sunday World newspaper, that now infamous photograph of flat cap Kevin Murray and the man in drag. He said he had seen it, and he said that Gerry Hutch was in a panic, he said, and he wasn't like any other time I seen him. So Gerry asked him, could you contact people that you know in the north? So allegedly looking for, again, some sort of peacekeeping deal, and he thought Jonathan Dowdall might be the man to do that. And Dowdall then said that Gerry said that it was, quote, him and them at the Regency Hotel. He said that Gerry seemed upset and he was not happy about shooting that young lad, David Byrne. He says that Gerry Hutch was not happy about shooting that young lad, David Byrne. Sean Gillane then asked Jonathan Dowdall, did he say who shot David Byrne? And Dowdall said that Hutch said it was him and Mago Gately.
Okay, Mago Gately.
We know who Mago Gately is, and we might provide some context to that, because obviously names are just said in court and then we move on. But we should probably just explain.
My name is Mago Gately. He'd be close to the Hutch family, I think it's fair to say. We know that he is currently his property in Dublin is currently the subject of an application by the Criminal Assets Bureau, who allege it was bought by the proceeds of crime. He and his partner or wife are fighting that. That's before the courts at the minute. But we also know that in May 2017, the Kinahan cartel tried to shoot Mago Gately. In fact, they did shoot him in a garage in North Dublin. He was wearing body armour and he survived. I remember that day. It was May and I thought he was dead, but he survived because of his body armour. And a couple, two people, I think, have been convicted, including a man called Keelan Smith, who would be a very dangerous criminal. But we also know that there was another attempt. So that was one attempt by the Kinahan gang to kill him. We also know there was another attempt in April 2017 involving a man, an infamous Estonian called Imre Arakas, who flew into Dublin on the orders of Daniel Kinahan to murder Mago Gately, who was living in Belfast at the time. And he would essentially, there was a very significant undercover operation by the Garda Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau and the Emergency Response Unit, and they raided a house in the Blanchardstown area of West Dublin, and they found Imre Arakas. And there's no doubt that that was an operation. Imre Arakas was going to head up north. He'd been given details of the car and everything that Gately was, and where Gately was living, and that was an attempt, a plot to murder Mago Gately that was foiled by the Gardaí here. So there's two attempts, two very, very serious attempts on Mago Gately's life. So he's obviously someone of very strong interest to the Kinahan cartel.
Yeah, certainly the Kinahans wanted him dead. This is the first time, again, in any open public setting, that somebody's name, that Mago Gately's name has been associated with the Regency Hotel. Again, obviously this is Jonathan Dowdall's allegation that Gerry Hutch said this to him. Mago Gately, James Gately, is not before the courts. He's not charged with any offence. It's important to say that, but obviously he's been incriminated here to a degree, at least allegedly, about his involvement. But anyway, Dowdall, he went at some length talking about how Gerry Hutch was agitated and said a lot of innocent people are going to get killed in this and that he needed his help to try and resolve this. And Dowdall says he didn't give him any firm commitments and he left the park. He said at that point, I didn't intend on doing anything. He felt regret that he had been told what he'd been told. He didn't want to have, he said he didn't want to have been told all that information. He said it's, I can't remember the quote now. But he said it was like knowing the location of buried treasure or something like that. It's not something it's not information he wanted to know, and he felt he got worried at that point about the booking of the hotel room in the Regency, and he thought that is going to lead back to me. And so he got worried about that. So he was sort of initially honest about that, thinking about himself and how it could end. And obviously it did lead back to him in the end because we know what happened. But at that point in time, Dowdall was worried about himself. And that's essentially what he told the court. That is the most significant evidence that was heard. I mean, I could go on at length about more what happened after the lunch break. For example, just briefly, there was, he was asked, was that the last sort of interaction that you had with Gerry Hutch? And he said no, that when they were in Wheatfield prison together briefly, they had an interaction. Gerry Hutch came into his cell and they talked, but eventually they fell out, as he said, for obvious reasons. and there was no more interaction between them. But he says that Gerry Hutch expressed concern about CCTV footage of himself immediately following the Regency Hotel, so on the 5th of February. And he says that Gerry Hutch was worried about CCTV footage showing his movements, but he said that Hutch told him he deleted his own CCTV, but he was still worried about neighbours' CCTV and basically what that might have picked up. So we were going to get to the point where then, we were coming to the end of Jonathan Dowdall's evidence, and what was going to be heard, Prosecuting Counsel Sean Gillane basically said, I want to play a specific portion of the 10-hour tapes and ask him questions about that. And that raised an objection from the defence. Brendan Grehan was concerned. He said he didn't know what portion of the tapes was going to be played, and he wasn't privy to exactly what Jonathan Dowdall might then say about that. And he was worried about that, and he said he didn't really want to stop proceedings, but he had to raise his objections to that. So they came to sort of an agreement that they're going to get a statement from Jonathan Dowdall about that specific portion of the tapes, so that there's no real, surprises or... he didn't want the witness to be offering commentary on it, he said, Brendan Grehan, without knowing or being able to preempt what he was going to say. The judge did actually say, well, depending upon what he says, it might be in your favour, but he still kind of raised the red flag and said, this could be an issue. I wasn't made aware of this in advance. I'm operating in the dark, so I have to stop things here. He did, he was quite honest. Brendan Grehan said, I was quite looking forward to cross-examining Jonathan Dowdall today, but I have to, raise my concern. So things were sort of stopped early. We weren't expecting that. So about 2:30 today, things were stopped. But as you can see, I've been going on and on and on. We've heard quite a bit today anyway. So I think there was a bit of relief from the reporters in the room that we got a little bit of a reprieve.
And so they're back tomorrow.
Yeah, they're back tomorrow. Jonathan Dowdall will be back in court, and I presume we will hear that statement. We're going to hear a portion of the tape, possibly, and then we will have Brendan Grehan, the defence counsel for Mr. Hutch, cross-examining Jonathan Dowdall, which should be very interesting.
But we don't know how long. That could be a day. It could be half. We have no idea how long.
Could be the rest of the week. He already indicated at the start of the trial that he would be cross-examining Mr. Dowdall for quite some time. He has a lot of questions. Obviously, he's going to question. Is he a reliable witness? He's already indicated that there are many examples as to why he feels Jonathan Dowdall can't be trusted. A word that he says can't be trusted. For example, the pills issue alone. That the tapes, everything he was saying on the tapes, he was on pills, so he was lying, etc. So, he's got a lot to grill him on. Okay, so tomorrow should be fun. Did you... I think it's a great privilege to be a reporter in a case like this. I can remember, covering cases like the Gilligan, the Joe O'Reilly, Mickey McKevitt even, and even Graham Dwyer a couple of years ago. It's you get a real sense of occasion. And I think it is a real privilege to be a reporter in a case like this. Did you feel that? Did you enjoy it? Yeah, I don't want to sound overly dramatic, but I would say it's probably the most interesting court case I've ever covered, and I do feel privileged to cover it. Yeah, and it has been fascinating to date, and I've learned so much about the process of the Special Criminal Court, as has members of the public, and we've gained insight into how the National Surveillance Unit works and the inner workings of the Gardaí and the state, and it's all coming under scrutiny. And people might have feelings and criticisms about maybe how this trial has operated to date. That commentary will come, but it's a fascinating process. It's not like any other criminal trial. So I'll probably remember it for the rest of my life in terms of covering it. Yeah, and as I say, it's fascinating. Just to be sitting there, even just as an interested party, forget about being a journalist. It's just very interesting. And what I like about this, because it's the special, you and I have a chance to contextualise things and to explain things. So I think we've done a pretty decent job explaining things, but just even, there's always a context for everything. And because it's the special and there's no jury, we've got a bit of leeway. So it's been very enjoyable for me. But anyway, doubtless we will be back tomorrow with another one, because I think there might be several pods this week depending on what happens in the trial, but maybe roller coaster day tomorrow. Okay, we'll wind it up there. Paul, thanks for that. Thank you. And thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll be back probably tomorrow with another one.